How far could American luxury go before becoming completely irrational? During the 1970s, Detroit answered that question by building automobiles with endless hoods, enormous padded seats, vinyl-covered roofs, and bodies so long that they seemed to occupy the entire road. While the world was beginning to worry about fuel consumption and compact automobiles were gaining ground, brands such as Cadillac, Lincoln, and Chrysler still defended a very different idea of luxury: more size, more silence, more comfort. In this video, we will discover 10 of the most elegant American land yachts of the 1970s. And before we begin, leave your like and subscribe to the channel to continue discovering the automobiles that made every decade an unforgettable era. 1974, Cadillac Fleetwood 60 Special. When this Cadillac stopped in front of a grand hotel, the first thing to arrive was not the driver, but its shadow. The hood, the vinyl roof, and the endless body seemed to move forward a few seconds before its passengers. The 60 Special appeared during one of the most contradictory moments in the American automobile industry. The oil crisis was already changing the conversation, but Cadillac still defended a form of luxury built around space, silence, and abundance. At nearly 19.4 feet long, and with a 133-inch wheelbase, it did not need excessive ornamentation to command respect. Its straight lines, vertical headlights, raised grille, and small taillights integrated into the fins created an almost architectural elegance. Its true spectacle began when the doors were closed. Thick carpeting, padded surfaces, and wide seats isolated the occupants from the outside world. Beneath the hood remained the enormous 472 cubic inch V8, not to turn it into a sports car, but to move that mass of steel without any apparent effort, accompanied by a suspension that softened the imperfections of the road. And Cadillac still had one surprise in reserve. In 1974, it offered the Talisman version, designed for only 4 people. Instead of bench seats, it had 4 enormous individual armchairs, 2 center consoles, carpeted footrests, reading lights, and an interior covered in Medici velvet. It was the only year in which the Talisman used this 4-passenger configuration, and only 1,898 units were built. Today, a well-preserved 1974 Fleetwood 60 Special is usually valued between $8,000 and $26,000, although an exceptional Talisman can exceed that range. It is not the most valuable Cadillac in history, but few explain better an era when traveling elegantly meant carrying a private living room down the road. 1973, Imperial LeBaron. If the Cadillac arrived like a limousine, the Imperial seemed to dock. In 1973, its body measured almost 20 feet long. The hood stretched ahead like the deck of a ship, while the inward curving sides shaped the final great representative of Chrysler's fuselage design. The headlights remained hidden behind the grille, and the small rear window, deeply framed by the vinyl roof, made the passengers seem as though they were traveling, protected inside a private cabin. Unlike other luxury automobiles, the Imperial did not try to look delicate. Its elegance came from its volume: enormous frameless doors, long fenders, and a silhouette that occupied the landscape with absolute calm. The interior offered room for 6 people, generously padded seats, wood details, and a driving experience dominated by silence and smoothness. Beneath the hood, it used the 440 cubic inch V8, approximately 7.2 liters. But its most surprising figure was not found in the engine. At 235.3 inches long, the sedan was one of the longest regular production automobiles ever built in Detroit. It weighed close to 4,940 pounds, almost as much as some modern SUVs, but distributed all that mass across a low and extraordinarily long body. It was also a farewell. The 1973 model closed the fuselage generation that had begun in 1969. That year, 14,166 4-door LeBaron sedans were built, each with a base price of $7,541. Today, a well-preserved example is usually valued between $13,000 and $38,000, although an exceptional example once sold for $44,000. It was not simply a large automobile. It was the final expression of an era when Chrysler still believed that luxury should occupy the entire avenue. 1972, Lincoln Continental. Mark IV. Some automobiles seem designed to reach a destination. The Mark IV seemed built so that everyone would watch its arrival. Introduced in 1972, this enormous coupe transformed excess into a surprisingly elegant composition. The vertical grille subtly recalled a Rolls-Royce. The headlights disappeared behind movable panels, and the hood extended farther than the eye expected. At the rear, the raised section imitating a spare wheel preserved a tradition begun by the early Continentals. However, its most memorable detail measured only a few inches. The small opera window, installed in the thick rear pillar, made the roof appear even more formal and turned the rear seat into a private corner. At its center was a star engraved and polished by hand. Lincoln even allowed buyers to remove the window and replace it with the traditional emblem, although few wanted to give up the element that would ultimately define an entire generation of American coupes. The Mark IV measured nearly 18.4 feet, weighed around 5,000 pounds, and used a 460 cubic inch V8. But its true luxuries were quieter: automatic climate control, front seats with independent power adjustment, thick carpeting, and a Cartier sign clock in the center of the dashboard. It was a French jewel marking time inside one of Detroit's largest automobiles. Today, a well-preserved 1972 example is usually valued at approximately $10,000 to $25,000, while extraordinary examples with very low mileage can command considerably more. And now, I want to know your choice. If you could keep one, would you prefer the sculptural elegance of the Imperial LeBaron or the aristocratic presence of the Lincoln Mark IV? Leave your answer in the comments. 1972. Oldsmobile 98 Regency. In 1972, Oldsmobile did not celebrate its 75th anniversary with a sports car or an extravagant campaign. It did so by building a luxury living room in Tiffany gold. The 98 Regency was created as a special four-door edition, designed to prove that Oldsmobile could move closer to the world of Cadillac without losing its identity. It measured nearly 19 feet, weighed more than 4,630 pounds, and had a 127-inch wheelbase. However, its size was only the beginning. The interior sought to reproduce the cushions of a piece of furniture. The seats were covered in limousine-quality velour, available in black or gold, and the split front bench allowed the driver's and passenger's positions to be adjusted separately. Nylon carpeting, center armrests, and zippered pockets completed a cabin created for traveling without hurry. The most extraordinary curiosity carried the name Tiffany & Company. The dashboard clock had a face designed by the jeweler, and each buyer received a sterling silver key ring registered in New York. If the keys were lost, they could be dropped into any American mailbox. Tiffany would identify the owner and arrange for their return. Beneath the long hood remained the 455 cubic inch Rocket V8, accompanied by a turbo-hydromatic transmission. The suspension even used computer-selected springs according to the weight of each automobile, seeking to make that enormous body move with the smoothness of a limousine. Oldsmobile announced up to 5,000 units, but approximately 2,650 were ultimately built. Today, a well-preserved 1972 98 is usually valued between $10,000 and $20,000, although an original Regency can reach higher figures. 1971 Buick Riviera. Seen from the front, it looked like a great American coupe. But all it took was walking toward the rear to discover that Buick had created something much stranger. The roof descended gently over an enormous wraparound rear window, while the body ended in a central point, like the stern of a luxury speedboat. This design gave it the nickname Boat Tail, and turned the 1971 Riviera into one of those automobiles impossible to confuse, even among the extravagant shapes of its decade. The idea was born under the direction of Bill Mitchell, General Motors' head of design, who wanted to recover the elegance of early automobiles with nautical-style bodies. Jerry Hirschberg was given the task of transforming that vision into a modern Riviera. However, there is a fascinating irony. The project had originally been conceived on a smaller and more slender platform, but it ended up being adapted to a much larger body. Years later, Hirschberg himself would admit that the result was more eccentric than he had imagined, and perhaps it was precisely that conflict that made it unforgettable. The Riviera measured more than 18 feet long, but its sculpted sides, long hood, and descending roofline disguised its size. Inside, the dashboard wrapped around the driver like a cockpit, accompanied by padded seats, thick carpeting, and the insulation expected in a great Buick. Its 7.5-liter V8 provided the power needed to move that steel sculpture with calm, while the Grand Sport version added firmer tuning without abandoning its luxurious character. Buick produced 33,810 units in 1971. Today, well-preserved examples usually sell for between $15,000 and $35,000, while an exceptional Grand Sport can exceed $50,000. 1971 to 72 Ford LTD. The LTD name had been born with an almost insolent promise to offer the silence of a much more expensive automobile. Ford even published a test in which the 1965 Galaxy 500 LTD traveled more quietly than a Rolls-Royce. 6 years later, that idea had evolved into one of America's great rolling living rooms. The 1971 LTD did not reserve luxury for businessmen, celebrities, or heads of state. It could be found in front of a suburban home, waiting for a family to begin a long road trip. However, at approximately 18 feet long, its presence was no less impressive than that of many prestigious automobiles. Ford worked especially on everything that could not be seen. The body was isolated from the chassis at selected points to reduce vibrations. The doors and windows received seals against wind noise, and the curved side glass eliminated the small vent windows. Advertising described it as a living room on wheels. In the LTD Brougham, the deeply padded seats attempted to reproduce the comfort of a household armchair. A reclining backrest could even be ordered for the front passenger, ideal for those journeys when the road seemed never to end. The vinyl roof, wide rear pillar, and 3 taillights on each side completed its formal appearance. The 5.8-liter V8 was standard, although engines of up to 7 liters could be selected. In 1972, the grille grew larger, the body reached nearly 18.2 feet, and the LTD continued refining a simple formula: luxury car size without the price of an exclusive automobile. Today, well-preserved examples are usually valued at approximately $8,000 to $23,000. And which one would you take on an endless journey across American highways? The artistic Buick Riviera or the comfortable and discreet Ford LTD? Leave your answer in the comments. 1975 Cadillac Eldorado Convertible. With the top down, the Eldorado did not seem to lose its roof. It seemed to gain the entire sky. Its body, nearly 18.7 feet long, moved along the coast like a long mobile terrace, with 6 occupants surrounded by leather, chrome, and an amount of space difficult to imagine in a modern convertible. The low windshield, endless hood, and new rectangular headlights for 1975 gave it a cleaner appearance, although it was still impossible to mistake it for anything discreet. That year, the Eldorado occupied an extraordinary position. It was the only regular production American convertible still remaining on the market. Ford had abandoned this body style, and Chrysler had done so years earlier. Cadillac, however, continued to offer an open automobile weighing more than 5,300 pounds, as though the changes in the industry could still wait. Beneath the hood was a 500 cubic inch V8, no less than 8.2 liters, connected to the front wheels. That configuration left the passenger compartment floor almost completely flat and allowed the occupants to sit without a large central tunnel. The engine did not need to demonstrate speed. Its job was to make that enormous Cadillac pull away from a traffic light with almost theatrical smoothness. Cadillac produced only 8,950 convertibles in 1975. 1 year later, the brand would announce the end of the open model, provoking a genuine rush among buyers convinced that they were purchasing the final American convertible. History would prove that this farewell would not be permanent, but for a few years it truly seemed like the end of a tradition. Today, a well-preserved 1975 Eldorado convertible is usually worth between $15,000 and $30,000. 1976 Buick Electra, 225 Limited. The name 225 had been created in 1959 to describe an automobile that was 225 inches long. But by 1976, Buick had taken the idea so far that the car now measured 233.3 inches, nearly 19.5 feet. It had even grown beyond its own name. Even so, it did not look like an intimidating machine. Its enormous rectangular grille, dual headlights, and skirts that partially concealed the rear wheels formed a serene silhouette. It was the kind of automobile that did not need striking colors to completely fill the entrance of a house. The limited version carried that calm into the interior. Velour, deeply padded seats, thick carpeting, and refined panels created an atmosphere closer to a living room than a cabin. And for those who still wanted more, the Park Avenue package added seats shaped like large pillows, a velour headliner, and even more abundant materials. But perhaps its most elegant detail was invisible with the doors closed. The sedan retained a genuine four-door hardtop body without a center pillar. With all the windows lowered, there was one continuous opening on each side, a spectacular feature that would disappear along with that generation. Beneath the hood, the 7.5-liter V8 moved nearly 4,850 pounds through a 3-speed automatic transmission. Its mission was not to provide excitement, but to allow all that mass to begin gliding without disturbing its passengers. The 1976 model was the final truly gigantic Electra before Buick downsized it in 1977. Today, a well-preserved example is usually valued between $8,000 and $25,000, although exceptional examples have exceeded $30,000. It was the final breath of a very American philosophy. If an automobile was already comfortable, the solution could still be to make it larger. 1976 Mercury Grand Marquis. Within Ford's hierarchy, there was a very narrow space between the popular LTD and the aristocratic Lincoln Continental. Mercury decided to occupy it with an automobile that seemed to borrow a little from both worlds. The 1976 Grand Marquis shared its family-size proportions with the large Fords, but hid its headlights behind a solemn grille, partially covered the rear wheels, and surrounded the cabin with a vinyl roof. It did not intend to dazzle like a Cadillac. It sought to convey that its owner had chosen something more refined without needing to announce it. The true difference was in what could be felt when entering. Its twin comfort lounge seats could be adjusted individually and combine leather with velour. There were simulated natural wood details, a digital clock, reading lights, thick carpeting, and even a fully upholstered trunk. Mercury also installed extensive sound insulation, so that road noise remained far away from conversations. Beneath the hood, the standard 6.6-liter V8 moved the enormous body through an automatic transmission. There was no urgency in the way it moved. The light steering and soft suspension turned every maneuver into a slow and deliberate motion, as though the automobile were always entering the main avenue of a city. But there is one curiosity that many people do not know. In 1976, the Grand Marquis was not yet an independent model. It was simply the most luxurious version of the Marquis family. Only in 1983 would that name become a separate line and ultimately survive for decades. Today, a well-preserved example is usually valued at approximately $6,000 to $15,000. Now tell me, would you prefer the almost excessive luxury of the Buick Electra 225 or the more discreet elegance of the Mercury Grand Marquis? Leave your answer in the comments. 1974 Chrysler New Yorker, Brougham. In the final automobile on this list, one of the most extravagant curiosities was not beneath the hood, but on the dashboard. Chrysler offered a digital clock certified by the Swiss government as a chronometer, with an advertised accuracy of up to 1 minute per month. It was a small obsession with measuring time inside an automobile, created precisely so that no one would be in a hurry. The New Yorker introduced a straighter and more formal body than the previous generation. Its wide grille, dual headlights, vinyl roof, and skirts over the rear wheels created a solemn presence, like a great building moving slowly down the avenue. It measured around 18.7 feet and weighed slightly more than 2 tons. On the hardtop versions, the absence of a center pillar made it possible to lower all the windows and visually open the sides, making the enormous cabin appear even more spacious. Inside, the Brougham used a 50-50 split front seat, with individual adjustments, separate armrests, and a reclining backrest for the passenger. An electronic warning light system monitored engine temperature, fuel, and voltage. Chrysler also installed insulation, foam seals, and vibration absorbers to create what it called the torsion quiet ride. The 440 cubic inch V8 was not intended to feel aggressive. Its purpose was to move that long living room with an almost indifferent calm. Today, a well-preserved example is usually valued between $8,000 and $23,000. In January 2026, an original example with slightly more than 24,000 miles sold for $15,950. The New Yorker Brougham closed this list in the right way. Not as the most famous land yacht, but as one of the final Chryslers capable of transforming excess into a surprisingly calm form of elegance. The land yachts of the 1970s represented an era when American luxury was measured in size, silence, and comfort. The brands on this list created genuine living rooms on wheels with enormous bodies, padded interiors, and a presence impossible to ignore. Now, I want to know your choice. If you could keep only one of these 10 giants, which one would be in your garage? The Cadillac Fleetwood, the Imperial LeBaron, the Lincoln Mark IV, the Buick Riviera, or one of the other models on this list? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you want to discover how this fascinating story began, watch our video about the most elegant American land yachts of the 1950s. There, you will find the enormous automobiles that, 2 decades earlier, helped create this idea of luxury, presence, and comfort on wheels. Click the video appearing on the screen and continue this journey with us.